As the title states, this is what can happen when you can fine-tune a fusion, fully craft one, and this fusion in particular brings up a lot of questions that I plan to go over. To start with, what I mean is that we knew that there were going to be some weapons that we were going to craft that would be inserted in the meta. Best of the best in slot perks, the whole thing. And in a couple of weeks, I do have another fusion review coming, but today is about the likely suspect. I want to break this fusion down, and I need you to understand some things, and I need you to understand what's really going on here, how certain things negate and bypass fusion qualities. And at the end, I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on fusions in the meta currently, this one and others. But the goal here is to equip you with information. Likely suspect is obtained from a quest reward. A truth goes both ways, and it only takes one deep sight completion to unlock the full pattern. Very accessible, it's void, which I'll get into in the PvE section. I've done many state of the fusion rifle videos. I've done fusion reviews, perk testing. As a whole, fusion rifles are evolving, and right now fusion rifles are the best that they've ever been in PvE and PvP, ever in Destiny 2, and that's something to really realize. They're the best that they've ever been in Destiny 2. The rapid fire frames got a big buff with the fusion rifle change, and with what they said about them, it isn't necessarily true. It's true on paper, but since we're able to craft them, it's kind of wrong. That charge time was decreased from 0.54 seconds to 0.46, so a little bit faster. The shot burst is increased from 7 to 9, so they have more bolts. And in turn, this has increased their total damage per burst. And remember, they said in playtesting they found that they were very effective against shotgun rushers. The combination of them needing to be closer, and you have a shorter charge time, really works well together. If you have really good timing, you can fire off 2 bursts of rapid fire before a high impact user finishes charging their first. This is true, you've seen it. And this one in particular excels in that shotgun range, and actually beyond shotgun range. And they also said that with the increased shots per burst, they're now more reliant on stability. And with the increased damage, they're less reliant on range. It's not true. I'm going to show you why. It can be true in a vacuum with how they designed or want them to be, maybe, but in game, no. The stats are fine with it. There's nothing to worry about. You see things like 50 recoil direction. A counterbalance mod would be perfect to get that curve on 65, but it doesn't matter. I don't recommend that. I would recommend a targeting adjuster. I'm going to walk through why. Because honestly, the stats don't really matter on this thing, like at all. And currently, what I suggest and recommend is you spec 100% into range. Like mine, I have full bore, range masterwork, projection fuse, and here's the reason. None of those stats matter because of one perk. It's firmly planted. I've talked about this on a fusion for years, literal years. This is the quick draw that was to shotguns, but for fusions. This is the snapshot for sniper rifles, but for fusions. And firmly planted's now on 6 total fusion rifles in the game. Likely suspect is the first rapid fire frame to have it. So to understand where we are, let's dive into this perk. Firmly planted gives plus 30 handling, so when you aim down sights, it does aim down sights faster. It gives plus 20 stability, around 40% accuracy cone size, 17% accuracy cone growth, and a 80% horizontal recoil reduction. This perk pretty much negates everything about a base stat fusion. It nullifies it, because when the fusion shoots, yeah, it has 50 recoil, it trails, it goes to the left at base, it's jumpy, but when you crouch, it's gone. Really lessened. The recoil direction is vertical. All 9 bolts are going to be sent on a rope right at the target, and that is at the furthest drop-off point because you have on max range, full bore, all range perks. Just negates it. In the Crucible, it has 9 bolts at 30 apiece, so 270 damage within that burst. You need to land 7 of the 9. That's 210 damage. So again, firmly planted makes it ADS faster, gets the recoil direction nearly vertical, and even with the stability at 29, because I have on full bore, it gets it to 49. Not to mention how much enhanced firmly planted is going to give that. But that stability at 49 or lower, I mean, does this look like poor stability to you? All you do is you guide it straight, a little down pressure as you shoot it, it levels it right out. So yeah, firmly planted does really negate everything right off the bat. And let's remember, tap the trigger got nerfed. And if you want to hear something crazy, tap the trigger now gives 10 stability, 12.5% max vertical kick, and a 2.5% accuracy cone size. So you can put on targeting on your helmet, change the masterwork from range to stability, make up that 10 stability, and you're pretty much right about there with what tap the trigger would give you, because that's giving accuracy. Then of course, targeting adjuster on the weapon itself over a counterbalance mod, that's adding target acquisition. So before I move on, this is with firmly planted the way it is right now in the game. It is the biggest outlier on a fusion. Like I said, it's the same as having snapshot on a sniper, quick draw on a shotgun in the Crucible. Think about it that way. Everything set up into this point for the Crucible is with that in mind. You're going to be just fine with max range as long as you have firmly planted. If firmly planted ever gets touched, it's still going to be decent probably, the perk, but if you have to reshape it, you're probably going to go with perpetual motion or slideways, possibly heating up. And by the way, of course, you do you. If you like one of those perks, go for it, but Firmly Planted is pretty nuts. It's crazy. And remember, it does work while you're sliding. You can slide around a corner, you have all those benefits. Throw those bolts on a rope. So I do suggest Firmly Planted #1 for the Crucible. If you don't like the perk or it gets nerfed, I always think about the future. There's Perpetual Motion, Slideaways are heating up. But on the other side, Node 2, there are 2 things that stick out. The first one is Successful Warm-Up. Each final blow increases charge time. A counter is going to be on the screen that resets. So on one side of the weapon in Node 1, we have Firmly Planted. That pretty much negates the downsides of the stats. Stability, recoil direction, gaining big bumps. All the things that should be in tip-top shape to perform. But on this other side, Node 2, you're negating the charge time now with the warm-up, and both together is complete. Now, I did check the zoom level. It does have a base zoom, but it appears to have zoom on the scope, so I can't really tell you anything, but it's probably base. These 2 perks together are wild. Again, everything that they want this fusion class to be is kind of tossed aside, and I believe it's because of the perks. The second one to pay attention to is Adagio. It's a very unique situation for Adagio. That reason being, it bumps the bolts from 30 to 39, that 30% damage increase. They also give +10 to the range stat. They made Adagio last longer. So this thing gets up to shooting to about the precision frame charge time, like main ingredient. It feels just a tad bit quicker, but it's right around there. It works really well because you're making those bolts do 39 and you're throwing 9 of them. A lot more room for error, a lot more room for damage fall off numbers. At base, not counting liquid coils, you need to land 5 of the 9. That's for 195. If not, it's going to be 6. So the one that I crafted is max range, Firmly Planted, Successful Warm-Up. It's a very unique roll right there. Like, this roll feels exotic, like Plan C. I don't know if you guys remember that from Destiny 1. It's actually a little bit better because you have it out. I'm going to come back to the Crucible, but I do want to talk about PvE for a second here. There are 2 instances where I can suggest it and recommend it. #1, you don't really have a nice Void Fusion like Null Composure, Glacioclasm, Snorri, meaning you might be a little bit new to the game. Maybe you missed some rolls down the line. Those fusions can all roll Reservoir Burst. They hit a little bit harder. They're going to do a little bit better. And the second thing is you might want to mess with Golden Tricorn. You get a kill with the fusion, there's a window to land an ability kill. When you do, it does 50% more damage. And you can get that going with Void 3.0 no problem, especially on Warlock. So yes, if you want to dip your toes in a Golden Tricorn, it's worth it. And of course, if you like it, use it. But I do believe that they're just simply better options. And remember, any Void weapon in the game shreds with volatile rounds. Go pull out a blue weapon that's Void. It's going to do awesome. And Unlikely Suspect, sure, there's some cool things. Stats for all, 1 for all. Possibly Adagio in PvE. Maybe you might want Wellspring. But I do personally believe that there are just better options. Use it if you'd like. But back to the Crucible to round out the video, the title and theme was, this is what happens when you can specifically pick your roles. And on the Firing Range podcast, which I do with Fallout Plays, Cammy Cakes, Drewski, and recently Mercules left us to go work at Bungie, GG's to him, and we record every other Wednesday, we talked about that. That was a topic on one of the episodes. What's going to happen when there's a weapon, and there is going to be at least one, maybe multiple, that is going to be best in slot everywhere, does everything right, and it kind of shoves out the competition, whether it be within the frame, the archetype, the charge time, whatever. Because when you pair specific things on certain weapons, and those kind of mesh together, you get something very strong sometimes, a very complete, strong experience. And Likely Suspect is that. It's up there with the main ingredient, the Snorri. And with the fusion rifles, again, realize a couple things. You see them because this one right here is fully craftable, and Zur brought 2 amazing ones. Both of those are good rolls. Metas come and go. You know this. There's a new flavor, new buffs, new nerfs, things change. And again, the fusion rifles are in the best place they've ever been in Destiny 2. That's a fact. And now we can craft them. The main goal was to kind of go over the information of why this thing's so good. But I do want to add in some thoughts where I think it's important. Do I think that these fusions are too strong? In some cases, yeah, I do. We need to remember that these things are hit scan. I think that what you're doing within their range is silly. Like, it's nuts sometimes. But I don't think that fusions are the problem. I think it's a perk. It's always worth discussing. What do all the Zur main ingredients, that timeline vertex, this Likely Suspect, what do they all have in common? And the next one that downs you in the Crucible, what's in that first node? I'd say 9 out of 10, it's going to be Firmly Planted. So that's up to Bungie. If it ever gets toned down, things like Under Pressure are going to come back on top, Heating Up, Slideways. So yeah, things are to get changed out. And I don't envy Bungie what they have to do. I don't know what they could do or will do. But with what the fusions are doing right now, I think that there should always be a counterplay. There's a lot of things in this gameplay that you can't counter. It's over. But you should be able to maybe a little bit, one way or another, for the sake of balance, because I believe that spaces should have competitive fights. When I talk about things, there are certain things that kind of stick with people, like I talked about OEM in the past, Wormhusk, but you need to understand, I do try to look at it as what's right for the game. And usually in those instances, people are upset because they're using it and they're maining it, which I understand it's fun, but I've talked about everything in the game. Things needing buffs, things needing nerfs. So as far as balance within this space, I mean, tell me what you think. If fusion rifles do stay like this, I think it would be appropriate for shotguns to get back some of the nerfs that they had. Mainly, while sliding, players now incur the following weapon penalties. -20 stability, they get increased pellet spread, and 5 times flinch. Balance-wise in that space, I feel like shotguns should get that back. I cover the game, try to do my best at least, and when the metas come, I play them, I counter them, I just play. Metas come and go. Sometimes they're really fun, sometimes not so much. And with something like this, things are what they are, it is what it is. Ultimately, it's up to Bungie to nudge things and poke things around. And at this time, this is a top fusion in its space, and I do encourage you to get it. If you're new here, remember to hit the subscribe button, and if you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. Let's talk about likely suspect down below. If you've crafted it, what roles did you go for? And what's nice about these craftable weapons is you can change them, and the material cost is going to be better at a later date. But let's say if Firmly Planted does get nudged on this thing, I'm going to spec back into stability. I'm going to move some things around. Probably go with perpetual motion or sideways. You just kind of roll with the punches, and that's kind of how this game is. But it's nice that we can reshape and do that. Thank you guys for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.